Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we are going to be talking to Dr. Charles Garfield, and he is the author of Life's Last Gift, Giving and Receiving Peace When a Loved One is Dying. So, welcome, Charles.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I look forward to the show.
This book was really just simply beautiful and in so many different ways. The stories that are written in here, the meditations that are included in here, and just the advice that you give from a perspective that I don't think we generally hear. So thank you for putting this book together. It's beautiful.
Well, you're very welcome. It's actually my legacy after 44 years of working with people who are dying and training many thousands of others who do the work. It was time to write it all down and make sure that it got out into the world. The response to the book has been extraordinary nationally.
Mm. So you started the Shanti organization in San Francisco to help people with both AIDS and as well as cancer. How did it even start? What started the Shanti organization?
Well, I was on the faculty at the Cancer Research Institute at the University of California Medical School, and I just needed help. There were too
Mm.
many patients dealing with the non-physical needs. The doctors and nurses were dealing with all the physical needs, but I was dealing with the non-physical, the emotional and spiritual and the interpersonal needs of God knows how many people, and I just needed help, so I decided that a volunteer organization might be just the thing, and that's how Shanti was born.
Wow, okay. So there's so many different parts in the book that I'd love to cover. I want to start talking about the conversations that you can have with loved ones and almost like how to take care of them. And one of the things that when you were writing, I thought, oh, I'm just like the person that you describe as what not to do, sadly. And you describe this person as, you have a loved one who has just been diagnosed with cancer or HIVs or something that's life threatening. It doesn't have to be these two. And and then you kind of want to go into solving mode. Like what can we do to prevent this cancer from, killing my loved one? And so I would imagine myself going into this hyper productivity mode of kind of doing research and finding out, second opinions when I didn't really like, what the doctors were telling me, and just rushing around like a chicken with my head cut off. Um, and I'm reading from your book that's not helpful. And
Well, what I say in the book actually is it's perfectly okay to get second opinions. In fact, it often makes sense. Find the best health care you can find. But when you go into what I call a heroic mode of
hmm
this, what you call running around like a chicken with its head cut off, what you do is you eliminate the possibility of connecting deeply with the person, the very person you're trying to care for.
mm,
What they want most is to not be alone. What they want most is to have someone there, a compassionate presence, who's willing to care for them wholeheartedly. And part of that will include looking for other opinions, other medical opinions, but just don't make that all you do, because you'll separate yourself from the person, the very person you're trying to help.
hmm and they don't want to be alone because they feel like I'm facing death by myself. I'm scared. Is that? I mean, it seems sort of ignorant on my part to ask, but I have to ask anyways.
No, it's perfectly okay to ask. They're afraid, and whether they're afraid of dying or whether they're afraid of the illness itself and the pain that they fear may come. And often people have this inflated sense of how awful it's going to be. Sometimes it can be awfully bad, but sometimes it can be managed. The pain can be
Mm,
managed well, and they may live for years with some of these illnesses. HIV right now, we have many people who have had the illness for many, many years
mm,
and are doing quite well. The same with some of the cancers we see. So what people want is they don't want to be alone. They don't want to be struggling by themselves when someone else who cares for them might actually join them on the journey.
mm. So so when I'm rushing around trying to, and in ways, that book about the five love languages. My love language is acts of service. So, in my limited perspective, I'm feeling like this is how I can show you love, but that's not what the other person is feeling because they don't want to be alone. They want you to just be with them.
Absolutely. I open the book with the first three chapters, which are listening from the heart, speaking from the heart, and acting from the heart.
Mm,
All of those imply a kind of compassionate attitude, a way of being with people. Just remember, one of the things that people don't realize is that when you're running around looking for things and you're not with the person who you're trying to care for, you're taking care of yourself. You're taking care of your own anxiety. You're
mm,
not taking care of the person in the bed.
mm-hmm,
Um, so it's important to find a balance between finding good information, the best information you can find that will be useful to them, but especially to be there with them, to be sitting right next to them in whatever situation they're in, at home or in the hospital or in hospice. It could be anywhere,
mm-hmm.
and make sure you're fully present with them.
Mm. So, what is it that you're taking care of? You talk about in your book that um, it's it's basically you're running around trying to control things because you feel out of control. Is that the primary thing that you're trying to take care of, or what is it that you're trying to take care of for yourself and running around like a chicken with your head cut off, or
You're
going to
you're trying
heroic
to
mode?
you're trying to minimize your own anxiety. You're
Mm,
trying to it can be very anxiety provoking to be the caregiver. If it's your husband or your child or your parent or someone you love deeply, it can be very anxiety provoking for the other person.
mm,
And instead of taking care of your loved one, you end up taking care of yourself more than anything
mm,
else. And I'll tell you what, the person who's going through the illness knows it. They're quite aware of your anxiety. They're quite aware that it's hard for you to be there, and they feel even more alone.
mm. Oh wow. Oh, that's bad. Okay, so how do you manage? So one of the things that you talk about is to be authentic with the feelings that you're having. So let's say you're feeling anxious or sad, or whatever is coming up, or worried that you're going to be alone, or whatever kind of emotions come up for you. How can you be both authentic with what you're feeling? Because from what I'm reading from your book, Life's Last Gift, part of it is to be authentic with what you're feeling because it opens the other person to join you, but then also not drag them down.
The way to do that is to be authentic without making it your problem.
Hmm.
Without you're not the patient. So if I'm taking care of somebody
Mm-hmm.
and they're going through an illness of major consequence, something important, something
Mm-hmm.
big, I might say to them, "This is pretty anxiety provoking, isn't it?" And this can be make us both pretty anxious, but we'll get through it together. Let's get
Mm,
through this together.
mm,
Everything is about doing it together. I'll
mm,
be there for you. We'll do it together. I'll go with you as far as we can go together.
mm,
Uh, to make sure you communicate that you're a partner in the journey. When my mother was dying and was in hospice care, one of the things I kept telling her that she said mattered the most to us was I said to her, "I'll be a partner with you as long as you want me to be here." She said, "I want you to be here for the whole thing." And I said,
mm,
"Then I'll be your partner through the whole experience.
mm,
I'll come and visit. We'll talk. We'll look at old pictures. We'll listen to music together. We'll do all those things that you enjoy and that we both enjoy."
mm.
And what I communicated to her, and I had to, you have to say it many times. You have to repeat yourself to make sure they get it. That you're there. You're there on this in this experience, and you're sharing it with them.
I was imagining I was imagining when you were sharing, I was reading that story that you just shared in your book. I thought, what would my mother say? And my mother likes being alone. And she's one of those kind of people who like I don't want to inconvenience you. I don't want my death to inconvenience you. Just leave me. Go back to your work. Don't let me just die alone. Which is one of the things that she would is kind of her go-to place. But do you honor that if someone says, I want you to just go away? Or is that kind of like when someone's dying, even if they may have been that way during life, they're not going to be that way during death?
Well, what I would say in that situation is, if it was my mother and she
Mm-hmm.
had said exactly the same thing you just said,
Mm-hmm.
what I would say is, Mom, you know what? The best use of my life right now is being here with you. And I'll go if you really want me to, and I'll think about you, and I'll hope that I get a chance to see you soon. But my preference is to stay here and to be with you. You're not hurting me. You're not what the parent especially is afraid of is that they're hurting their child, that they're
Mm.
preventing their child from living their life. If you assure them that the best use of your life right now is to be there with them and to let them know, and you can say quite honestly, when I was a when I was an infant and when I was a child, you took care of me, and this is my opportunity and my blessing to take care of you now.
Mm. Mm. That's beautiful. So it's really, I'm hearing a couple things. So the right balance is so not to have them like, oh, I'm a wreck, because then they're like, oh, now I have to take care of you and I'm dying. So seriously, don't put that on me. It's more just stating the facts as they are. This is a really anxiety producing situation. So that's authentic, but then not necessarily having them have to own or take care of you. You can just take
Yes.
care of your own self by sharing in the anxious experience both of you are having. And so if you say this is an anxious experience and they go, well, I'm not feeling anxious, and you go, okay. Like you don't go into like, well, I am.
Yeah. No, you don't. No, don't make it your problem.
Yeah.
If they say no, I'm doing fine actually, and I hope you'll be doing fine soon too, then great. Talk. You don't have to talk about profound things all the time. You can talk about what you've talked about for a lifetime, or you can talk about the weather, or you can talk about whatever mutual interests you have, or whatever interests the person who's ill has. Um, just remember that there are things going on there, especially if you have an opportunity to be with somebody for a period of time. And we talk about this in Life's Last Gift a lot. You're making memories, you're lessening regrets, you're expressing gratitude. All of these things are important, and
Mhm.
they're told to you in the stories that people tell you.
Mhm.
It's a blessing to listen to people's stories and
Mhm.
to listen to the stories of a lifetime.
Mhm.
People talk about two things in their stories. They talk about people they loved and who loved them, and they talk about work they were proud of.
Mhm.
Love and work are the two things that people talk about most. And to be chosen as somebody to hear those stories, for them to share those stories with you, is one of the greatest blessings you can have in caring for somebody who is ill.
Mhm. How's it changed you from listening to all these stories of both the work that they're proud of and people who love them and that they loved? How do those stories have they impacted you?
Well, it's a great question. It's impacted me by getting me to look at my own life
Mm.
and the people I love and the people who I've been closest to, and to make sure that they know it. To make sure that I said the I love yous before the end,
Mm.
before things get very challenging in a life-threatening
Mm.
situation.
Mhm.
Say I love you when you can. Say I love you in normal course of daily life.
Mhm.
And the other thing is to make sure that the work that I'm doing is work that I'm proud of, work
Mm.
that makes a difference, that serves a purpose greater than just my own needs and my own life.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, so
Um,
so those are kind of the things to expect. What are the regrets and worries? So those are things more like these are my memories, these are my legacy in terms of who I loved and who loved me and work. What are the things that are worries and regrets that you hear?
well, people sometimes have regrets about life choices that they made, either the person that they chose to be with, or especially the work that they chose to do. If I
Mm.
had to say, if I had to say that, I've gotten used to people looking at me and then saying, you know what I always wanted to do? And I know before they even start telling the story that I'm going to hear something very powerful. And like with my father, when my father was dying, he said to me, "You know what? I always wanted to be an actor. I always wanted to be an actor, but I grew up during the Depression, and there was no way that acting made any sense from a financial point of view. So I went into sales, and I became a salesperson, and I did pretty well with it. And I said, "Why'd you go into sales? What led to that choice?" He said, "It was as close to acting as I could get."
Mm.
and and he went on to talk about all of the thoughts. I asked him how often did you think about acting during the years as a salesman? He said, "I thought about it all the time." And sure enough, as soon as he retired, within a week of his retirement, he joined an acting troupe at a senior center, and he took part in all sorts of plays for the remainder of his life.
That's beautiful. So it's they want to talk to you about what they would have done, life choices that they would have done. And after having fulfilled that in the latter part of his life, did it feel like it was enough, or did he still have this sense of regret during his death?
No, he didn't, because we talked it through. And what I made clear to him, and what he got, because he was a bright enough guy to really understand it, was that he made the right choice.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
act-
Wow.
acting was acting was a very precarious position, and he understood why he did it, and he forgave himself. He forgave himself
Oh, wow.
for he was holding all of this regret about making the wrong choice, and he realized
Mm,
no, he didn't make the wrong choice at all. He made the right choice, and because he went into acting afterwards, after he retired from sales, he actually did both during his life. He took care of both sets of needs.
mm. Wow, that's really beautiful. So I'm a little bit confused with the chronology. So did you ask him about did you come to that conclusion through a conversation that you had near when he was dying, or did you talk to him throughout life and then kind of came to this conclusion over a long period of time?
This all took place after he was diagnosed with a terminal illness.
Wow.
He had to sort through the choices that he made and how he felt about them. So he was reflecting back on his career as a salesman, on his choice to go into acting after he retired. He was reflecting on all of those choices and trying to make sense of them. And
Mm,
that's what that's a great gift that you can give people who are ill. You can help them sort through their lives and come to terms with things that maybe they regretted, and
mm,
also to allow them the opportunity to express gratitude. My father was very grateful that he had the opportunity to go into acting after he retired,
mm,
because it was something he deeply wanted to do. The thought of never having done it would have been a terrible blow to him, and
mm,
uh, and he didn't have to do that.
mm. So when you're in conversation with him, is it just through listening and being quiet that the person themselves, like your father, came to that conclusion? Like, now that I've talked this through, I actually don't feel regretful, and I feel so grateful that I was able to do acting. Or was it something that you were kind of, as a psychologist, kind of coaching him through?
No, it was less coaching, and it was less me being a psychologist than it was simply listening from the heart, letting
Hmm.
him talk it through, and asking a few questions from time to time. Asking questions turns out to be much more important than having the right answers. Everybody's wondering about and worried about, are they going to know what to say and what to do? Everybody wants the perfect formula. That's not what this work is about.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more about asking questions and being curious than it is about having the right solutions.
Mm. And you talk about this a couple different times in your book where you're listening with your heart versus your mind. And there are various exercises that you have people go through in responding. So let's say that you are trying to do as you advise in your book, Life's Last Gift, and be in your heart. And you hear someone say, I don't know, so you said some of them were about love. Like, I really feel bad about the way I treated, mom, or whatever. I'm trying to think of, maybe you. Why don't you come up with one? Because I probably can't come up with one that's authentic. But can you lead me through an example of someone saying a regret that they had about love, and how you would listen through the heart? versus through the mind, and how, like,
Well,
literally the energetics and or experiential sense, meditative state that you need to be in to do that.
it's a great a great suggestion. Your idea of what if I heard from somebody, which I have on plenty of occasions. I regret how I treated somebody. Let's say I regret how I treated your mother. I
Mm-hmm.
wish I had been kinder to her. I wish I had been around more. I was so buried in my work that I didn't even think about what she was going through.
Mm,
Let's say somebody says that, and I've heard
mm-hmm.
that plenty of times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Rather than listening from the head and coming up with a solution, you're coming up with the right answer. Like, what would the right answer would be? Well, you were busy, Dad, and you didn't have the time, and you did the right thing for yourself at the time. Rather than doing that, to simply listen from the heart and imagine what it would be like for you if you made the same choice as he made. The choice to bury yourself in work. What would it be like? And to turn that into questions. Um, so you would say something like, "Now that you're thinking about it, Dad, how does it seem to you now? How does it all seem? The choice to bury yourself in your work, rather than imagine that you have all the answers to it, which you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the question. Let him just tell his story.
Mm-hmm.
Let him. It's called catharsis. It's you
Mm,
you you get it off your chest. You get to express it, and rather than hold it in and torture yourself with all sorts of thoughts, which may or may not be all that important in the long run. And in the final analysis, what people come up with is, you know what? I made the best decision I could with what I was working with at the time. Given
mm,
who I was at the time, and given the circumstances of my life, I guess I made the only decision I could have made. I wish it had been easier on us all. And
mm,
what I would say is, you know what, Dad, you need to tell this story to Mom right now. So the next time you see her, why don't you just say that you've been thinking about it all and you have some regrets about it, and although you were a good provider and you worked really hard, you wished you'd had more time for her. And make sure that you spend as much quality time with her now in the time that's left as you possibly can.
mm.
And people look at me, and when I say stuff like that, and you can see tears sometimes form, and people will say, you know what, that's a great idea. Can you make sure she comes as soon as possible? I can't wait to talk to her about it.
Mm, it's beautiful. So it's it's I have this great gentleman who was coaching me about how to coach people in groups, and he gave me this I feel is like the best advice ever. He said when there's a standstill, when you feel like you don't know what to say, like there's the energy has stopped, you don't know what to say, you're just lost. Just say, well, what are you thinking, feeling, or needing at this time? And just that simple question just relieves you of any pressure, right? Because, well, really, the person is either thinking something, they're feeling something, or needing something. And if you ask, what are you thinking, feeling, or needing at this point? Even if you have someone has said something that you don't even know how to deal with, to me, that's been my go to question. Where like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to
It's a
ask, what
great
do you
que-
think?
It's a great question. And I can see why it's your go-to question. It's a great question, but more even than the content of it is the fact that you're asking a question. You're lifting the burden of having to know what to do to say the
Mm,
right thing. You're
mm-hmm,
lifting that burden, and you're simply asking a question, which is one of the most important things I tell the people I train, whether they be doctors or nurses or whether they be volunteers at Shanti Project.
mm-hmm,
Um, you don't have to have all the answers. What you do have to do is simply know how to ask a question.
mm,
Be curious. Be honestly curious and ask a question. It's not just, when you ask the question you just asked, your go-to question, it's not just a formula that you're using. It's not just some mechanical question. You have to really feel the curiosity.
mm-hmm.
What are you needing right now? Oh, what things would be most useful to you right now. And then listen, see what you get.
Mm-hmm. Well, it always surprises me because when I ask that question, it's usually not a kind of a mechanical, spit out like a computer. But when I do ask, I am kind of curious, and the answers always are amazing because they do bring someone deeper into whatever is their experience at that moment. Um, what about worry? You talk about in your book about, I worry about what's going to happen with so and so. Are they going to be okay with, how would you, um, what are the worries that people generally have when they're, facing the last few moments of
Well,
their life? Or, yeah.
one of the major worries is that they'll be abandoned,
Oh,
that people will leave, that people will come to visit once or twice, and then when things get harder, they won't be there.
oh,
And you can alleviate a lot of that by anticipating it, by simply saying, you know what, I want to, as I said before, I want to share this journey with you as far as we can go together.
mm,
And in terms of being there and visiting, I'm going to do that as long as you want me to. And that can help. And then you have to do it, of course. You can't
right,
just say it.
right.
Uh, that alleviates a lot of that concern. Another worry, of course, is that they'll be in pain that can't be alleviated. People have all this often exaggerated sense of how awful it's going to be. And although sometimes it can be very difficult, I'll grant you that. The pain management strategies for many of these illnesses now are much different than they were when I first started this work
Mm,
over 4 decades ago. Most pain can be managed in a reasonable fashion, sometimes a superb fashion. I remember my mother, who was in arthritic pain for years before she was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. Her arthritis was terrible. They took care of her pain so well that she said to me, I wish I had this experience years ago. I don't feel any pain at all.
mm,
And they alleviate. And she was somebody who complained about it nonstop. And then in her dying time, in the last year of her life, she was essentially pain free because we were able to get the right medication, the right docs who knew how to prescribe the right meds, and we got her free of that pain. People are often very worried about how much pain they're going to be in.
mm,
I would say those two, the fear of abandonment and the fear of being in pain, are two of the primary worries people have.
mm. Do they worry about their loved ones? Like, what's so and so going to do without me? Or when it really comes down to it, they're just more focused on their own life at that point?
It varies a lot. There are people who certainly are concerned about what you see a lot is people concerned about their spouse, their partner, their primary person.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people say, I can't imagine how she's going to handle it after I'm gone, or I
Mm,
don't know what he's going to do without me.
mm,
Um, what you do is you get them to discuss it. You get them to talk about it. And of course it's going to be hard. And of course they're going to go through a rough period. That's why we talk about grief and bereavement. The grief period afterwards can be very challenging.
mm,
But people get through it. And if other people get through it, we'll get through it.
mm,
My life won't be the same as it was before, but I'll get through it somehow.
mm, mm. So that's how, is that something that you would have them talk with their spouse about, or you talk with it through them and then they can talk
I
to their spouses about it afterwards?
it's the latter. I frequently talk with them about it first, almost like a rehearsal,
Mm,
and then of course they have to have the conversation with if they wish. They can say no, I don't want to do that. But most of the time people say if you can tell me what to say and what to do and how we might do it, and I'll say there's no magic formula, there's no right thing to say. It's about having a conversation.
mm,
Deathbed conversations can be very, very important, and they include the issue that you bring up, the bereavement, the issue of grief and bereavement. What's it going to be like for you after I'm gone?
mm,
And people will say they'll tell the truth. For a while, it'll be awful, and I'll never forget you. And that's people are concerned with whether they'll be forgotten or not.
mm,
Um, and you help people understand that I'll be carrying you with me in my heart for the duration. You'll be alive. I'll talk to you. I still talk to my parents.
Mm,
They've been dead for years, and I still talk with them.
mhm,
And that's something that you hear very frequently.
mhm,
Um, and it sounds a little odd, perhaps, but it's not at all. You can hear people in your heart and in your mind. You can hear people and what they might have said if you ask them a question.
mhm,
Um, it really is quite useful to be able to do that and to normalize it so that people know it's a normal thing.
mm. Yeah, my dad passed away 25 years ago, and I still talk to him.
Yep. So
Yeah, they're never forgotten, for sure.
but it's important to say it. It's important to say
Mm,
that.
mm,
I'll never forget you. You're an integral part of my life, and you're somebody who was very, very important to me, as you know. And I will never. You'll always be in my heart.
mm, mm. Well, you're getting me all choked up. And I know you're just talking about hypothetical questions. But these are things, what's interesting is that why am I getting choked up? I think well, they're beautiful things that you're saying, but it's so rare that we have these heart-to-heart conversations with people, right? Where we really just tell them what matters to us. And so it's to me,
Well,
yeah, for me, when I read this book, I thought, well, this is more about how to talk to people who are living. I mean, why wait until they die before you say
that's
all
the
these things?
that's the secret of the book, and I didn't even realize it until people like yourself started saying it to me.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that people will say, this is not just a book about people at the end of life. This isn't just about the dying time. This is a way of being with people in all relationships
Yeah.
during life.
Yeah.
Why wait till the end to learn all of this? And
Yeah.
that's exactly right. That's if there's a secret in the book, that's the secret.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that is the hardest for me is how you just shut up and be quiet. I think that because, I'm trying to solve everything, right? Where it's like that's not helpful sometimes. I mean, like you said, try to make sure that your person's getting great medical care and following up on things that they've asked you to. But otherwise, don't be quiet, don't do anything. How have you trained? And I'm sure this is the case for a lot of people you train. How do you help them achieve this kind of quiet listen, just shut up, basically?
Well, to let them know, first to make it conscious. They have to know that they're doing it.
Hmm.
Sometimes people aren't even aware of it until you point it out. But
Hmm.
once you point it out, let them know that they're talking so much and running around so much because they want to take care of their own needs as much as they want to take care of the other person's needs. And if you really want to let them know, if you really want to be useful to the person you care about most, if you really want to provide them with the quality of care that you say you do, then listen, be quiet, ask questions from time to time, make sure you visit, and don't be afraid to say, I love you in a variety of ways.
Mm.
When my mother was dying, I wrote about this in Life's Last Gift. Um, she loved these ice cream treats, little ice cream pops on a stick.
Hmm.
And I would bring them to her all the time. And one day she asked me, "Can you bring many boxes rather than just one box for me?" And I thought,
Yeah.
my God, she wants to overeat and commit suicide by ice cream. And I had no idea what she was up to. And I came in and she said, "Put one box in my little refrigerator over there for me. And can you go around?" She was in an extended care facility. She was a skilled nursing facility, rather. And being taken care of by hospice, she said, "Can you hand out some of these to the docs and the nurses, but especially to the other patients, and see who
Oh,
wants a treat?"
sweet. Oh,
Um,
that's sweet.
she was so happy when I told her that, and people would come in and tell her that they loved the ice cream, and she was really pleased that she got a chance to do that. Little things like that
Oh,
mean an awful lot.
yeah. Very sweet. That's very, very sweet. um, I hope you're. Can you come when I'm dying? Can you please just come and sit next to me? Okay.
Hopefully, I get that a lot, but it hopefully the way the world is now, there are all sorts of good people working at hospice and in hospitals and in skilled nursing facilities who know how to do this work and who things are a lot different. I taught in a medical school and nurses came to my lectures, and I was really struck by how different it is now than it was all those years ago when people were so confused about everything.
hmm Okay, I want to touch upon another idea that you have in your book. You talk about, and we've already talked about, it's kind of a balance of silence, uh, doing things for people when they ask, um, small talk, doing just telling, hearing their stories, and then there are the big questions that help people gain perspective, like talking about their fear and nearness of death. So you say in the book, what would you do? What would you like to do with your time left? How do you, talking to them about their fear and nearness of death. And I'm kind of afraid to ask these questions. So how do you talk about the big questions in a way that you feel comfortable and they feel comfortable?
Well, by letting them know that big questions, that there are still some big questions to be asked, and you want to know if this is a good time to do it, and they'll ask you, what sort of big questions do you mean? And then you ask one, you try one out, and you see how. Don't be surprised if the very thing that you're most afraid of is precisely what they want to talk about.
Mm,
Um, Remember, when you'll visit for an hour or two. They're alone in that bed or in that room for many, many hours. What do you think they think about? What do you think? They think about sports or their investments? They're not thinking about any such thing. They're thinking about the very big questions that are still left to be answered.
mm,
Like, what is dying like? Can you tell me what I get this all the time? Can you tell me anything about what dying is like? How is it going to be for me?
mm.
Or do you believe in an afterlife?
Wow.
What's going to happen? And that's what my mother asked my wife. What's going to happen after I die? And Cindy very wisely said, "Well, I don't know. I don't know that anybody really knows, but different traditions have different points of view and different stories about what happens after we die. Would you like to hear some of the stories?"
Mm,
And my mother couldn't wait to hear them. And that led to a wonderful discussion, including a story that my mother really valued a lot about the wave and the drop. We come into the world as part of a wave. We drop off as an individual identity for a period of time. And then afterwards, when we die, we fall back into the ocean again.
mm,
And for whatever reason, and you can't judge it or anything, my mother loved that story. She brought it up to me when I came to visit. She said, Cindy told me this wonderful story about the afterlife and about falling back into the ocean again and being one with all others. And that's really the story that I want to ride out on.
mm.
But
Um,
don't be afraid to ask those kinds of questions because it's precisely what the person is thinking. And if they don't want to talk about it, they'll say, "I'd rather not."
mm. So don't worry
I'm not
don't
having.
worry. Yeah. So they'll tell you if they don't, and don't worry about bringing it up. I would worry about they're not thinking about this, and here I am bringing it up and having them think about something that they've been trying to ignore. Uh,
Nope, that's not going to happen.
okay.
You won't get them. You won't surprise them with a topic that they haven't considered. Just remember the comment I made a little while ago. You're there for an hour or two. They're there for all the rest of those empty hours, and they're thinking about all sorts of things. And many of the things they think about are the big topics that you're referring to.
Mm. So they're thinking they have worries, they have regrets, they have gratitude, they have these big questions. That's kind of from their perspective what's happening as they're,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. They're thinking about what their legacy is. They're
Mm,
thinking about doing what people often do, what's called life review. They'll go over their lives. They'll look at me and say, "Can I tell you a story?" When I was a kid, and then they'll go into their story about when they were a kid and what they always liked to do. And I always used to. One older woman said, when I was a little girl, I put my dolls in a row and I would teach them lessons.
Mm.
And I knew from the age of 10 that I always wanted to be a school teacher. And then I got this lump in my stomach with the thought, I wonder if she became a school teacher. So I asked. I said, did you get to be a school teacher? She said, 40 wonderful years as a school teacher.
Oh.
And it
Mm.
was great. And I knew from the age of 10 on, when I was teaching my dolls, that I wanted to be a teacher. And
Mm.
I said, I said to her, what lesson from your life would you most want me to teach my students? And she was so happy I asked that question. We talked about it for a while.
Mm.
And she gave me some wonderful responses to that, including don't wait to say I love you to the people you care about most in the world.
Mm. Wow, I can see how it would be an incredible gift to your life to just sit with these people who are in the final stages of their life and hearing how you could live life differently.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
It's
Okay.
been it's been a gift. It's been an absolute gift to have this career. And when I say it to people, they think, "Oh, that must be hard," or "I could never do that," or it's the same cultural bias that we have about being with people at the end of life. And I understand it, but there are also blessings that come from it, and they're much more obvious than the burdens.
Mm. So and I'm going to go back to the comment that you made about life review. And, when you talk to people who are mediums, who are people who talk to people who have passed on to the other side, they talk about a life review process where you go through and you're kind of looking at all the decisions and choices and impact that they've ever made on other people. And it's interesting to me that kind of before that even happens, people are kind of going through that whole process. What are the big things that you mentioned in your book, like when people think about you, what would you like them to remember most, or what are the big questions that people are trying to figure out during this life review process?
Whether their life had meaning and purpose. When
Mm.
they go through the life review, did my life make sense? And the bottom line question is, did I live a good life, or
Mm.
did I waste it?
Mm.
And what you do is you work with people so that they can focus on what they valued most. Well, what were the values that really guided your decisions? Well, I wanted to take care of the people I most loved in the world. Well, that's a wonderful thing. That's a life lesson we all can learn from. You try to ennoble as much as you can. You
Mm.
try to ennoble their decisions so as to minimize regrets.
Mm.
And sometimes you can't avoid some sense of regret. And I suspect we all have some sense of I wish something had been different.
Mm.
Um, Nobody lives a perfectly magical life where everything is perfect. But for the most part, you want people during that life review to focus on what had meaning and purpose for them, what they most valued, and then to ennoble it, to let them know that you think that that is absolutely marvelous, and
Mm.
that you really admire them for taking a stand for living their life that way.
Mm. So, is there any meaning or purpose that you're like, I don't know what to say? Like, are there certain people who are like, I don't think life, are there certain times when it's hard to ennoble?
Yes, there are times when people will say, um, well, I'll give you an example of somebody I worked with fairly recently. Um, a very successful corporate executive who had made a phenomenal amount of money, more money than any of us would need for 100 lifetimes. And and he said there was only one principle that guided my choice about continuing in my work. I said, what was that? He said, making a little bit more money. And I said, what did you want to spend it on? He said, spend it. I never even thought about spending it. I bought some things. I bought nice things, but they didn't really matter that much to me. It was my portfolio. I wanted more and more and more. and now it's the end, and I don't have any time left really to speak of, and I think I wasted my life.
Oh.
And I said, what would I said, well, what meaning can we create, you and I, right now? What meaning can we create right now so that I learn a lesson from you that you want to pass on to the people I speak to in my lectures and in my books? And if you want to do that, I'm with you. Tell them, please, to not ignore the people they care about most, to pick some work that they really value. I never valued my work except what it would bring to me in terms of dollars. Tell them to make sure that they put financial concerns in their right place as one thing to be taken care of, but not the main thing. Pick something you really love to do and get really good at it and really enjoy it. And I said, I promise that I'll tell this story to as many people as I possibly can, and I'm telling it to you right now um, because it's a very valuable story. It's a story of a man who felt that his life had gone the wrong way,
Mm.
and it was only on his deathbed that he realized that he heard the voice from his own heart saying, "You went the wrong way."
Mm.
Um, and
Mm.
it's learn the lesson before it's too late.
Mm. Wow. That's a powerful story.
Yes,
Yeah, so
yes,
it's
it
it's it's
certainly it
helping him
certainly
make.
was.
Yeah, so it's almost him sharing that story and him knowing that you're going to share it. That at least gave his life meaning in the end.
Yes. Yes, that's what gave his life, ultimately gave his life some meaning, knowing that that story was going to be of use to other people.
Mm. Wow. So, um, you have two really challenging sections in the book. One is when someone wants, like you had said that, oh gosh, and we only have 3 minutes. But one you mentioned, what do you do if someone asks you something really hard? Like, I would like to have assisted, suicide, and I'd like you to do it. Um, I just can't even imagine facing those kind of questions, but I think there are probably a lot of times when you are asked to do things that are very, very hard. How does one deal with those things when they're asked to do things that just they don't feel good about?
Then you don't do them. You have to respect your own boundaries and limits.
Mm.
My mother, my mother was hoarding pills. I discovered her pills one day. All of these sleeping pills, a giant baggie of sleeping pills, and I knew exactly what that was about because I had seen it before. And I said, "What are you doing with this?" She said, "When the time comes, I want to take them all, and I want you to be there." And I said, "I can't do that." I said, "I can't possibly do that. That's illegal, and I'll get into an enormous amount of trouble if I was any part of this." And the next time I came to see her, she said, "I threw away all my pills. I was being selfish, and I'm really sorry." I said, "No, no, you were doing something that you thought was right. I understand exactly why you were doing it. I love you, and we're going to take care of you and make sure that things are as pain-free as possible.
Mm. Mm.
But you can't do anything that offends your sensibilities or your values, or that's inappropriate or even illegal."
Mm. So we have 1 more minute. We have a couple questions in here. One was, do you train people to do this? And the answer is yes. How would people who are interested in getting trained to this work, how would they get involved?
All they have to do is go to my website, charlesgarfield.com. It's very easy, charlesgarfield.com. All the information about Shanti and about the work that I've done is there, and it's in a very clear form.
And so they can get training. It's an online training, or do you have to come down in San Francisco to get the training?
Well, it's not online. No, it's in-person training. So if
Okay.
people want to get trained, we have people who come from all sorts of places.
Okay. All right. And then oh, it's time. Oh my goodness. I wish I had longer time with you. I'm sure people say that a lot to you. All right. We've been talking to Dr. Charles Garfield about his book, Life's Last Call, Gift, Giving and Receiving Peace When a Loved One is Dying. Thank you so much for this body of work. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.